It's time for the Wrestling Inc. Daily Podcast. I am your fill-in host for the week, Michael Wiseman. Your normal host with the most, Nick. He is on vacation. He has a much-deserved, well-earned vacation overseas, away from all of us here stateside, and we hope that he is just having the time of his life. I'm your normal co-host for the Monday Wrestling Inc. Daily Podcast. And I am very excited to be, number one, filling in for Nick all week long and getting to spend time with all the normal co-hosts throughout the week who will be joining me every day in typical fashion. But number two, to be joined today in particular by my very good friend and former Between the Ropes co-host, Brian Fritz. Brian, welcome to the Wrestling Inc. Daily.
Thanks for having me. And you forgot to include Coaster Enthusiast and Coaster Buddy after our weekend that we had together.
That's exactly right. So Brian and I, if you all know, we already have people in the chat room calling this out, of course. Michael Thomas Banshit's out there with the super chat saying, Between the Ropes, got carried away, my bad. Yes, Brian and I used to co-host a little show known as Between the Ropes. Brian and I did that for many years. He had done that for many years before I ever entered the picture. Brian is one of the... Brian, you were doing radio back in the 90s when the Attitude Era was evident. So this guy goes all the way back with it.
I started Between the Ropes on terrestrial radio. I think you were like 3 years old when I started doing that.
Yeah. That's what it was.
Something like that.
But Brian and I have carried on a very good friendship over the years since our time on Between the Ropes together ended. And we were just at Carowinds this past Saturday sharing some high thrills on the Carowinds Big C's, right? So
I think I finally recovered. Yeah.
No sunburns. We had a great time.
Yeah.
We are just going to have a great time here today, breaking down big freaking news over the weekend. Lots to get to here throughout the show today. We'll be with you for the next half an hour or so. And of course, we do have the live chat wide open. Of course, Mick Caps Pedo 64 says, Nick can kick rocks. LOL. Miss you, Nick. Enjoy the vacation. Yes, we all hope Nick has a great vacation. Sherrod Jones, Brian, welcome. Getting some love from Brian. And, of course, Monkey Armada, longtime fan Between the Ropes. The boys are back in town. So we are going to have a lot of fun today. This is the Wrestling Inc. Daily Podcast, though. And before we get started, if you've not had a chance yet, we do have the mailbag open. We'll get to it later in the show. But just plugging in here, where do fans want to see Dakota Kai end up? You can go get your vote in on the Wrestling Inc. Daily Twitter channel. Right now, it's at Wrestling W Inc. Daily. And one big news, I think this was maybe the biggest news of the weekend at Wrestling Inc., and that is we want to give our congratulations to Rhea Ripley, who confirmed over the weekend she is seeing AEW star Buddy Matthews. Brian, love is in the air, and pro wrestling fans love it when two people, especially in competing companies, they hook up behind the scenes.
Absolutely. And you know what? It's not like the old days when you'd always be worried that something was going to go awry, like in a storyline, and people would be like stealing everybody else's better halves. So at least today we support one another rather than trying to steal behind the scenes.
Well, that's right. Let's turn this into a work shoot. Is this going to turn into a rivalry between AEW and WWE? We have Forgotten MMA joining us in YouTube here. Thoughts on Ryback? Forgotten MMA. I have zero thoughts on Ryback. Thank you for asking.
Yep.
And you can join in on the chat too as well. So if you're following us on YouTube, Facebook, please get those comments in, and we will give you all a shout out right here on the show. But with all that said, as Nick would say, news you can use. Let's jump into it. News that will leave a bruise. And unfortunately, this news is bruising. Fightful reported on Friday that multiple WWE NXT stars were released. An email to talent relations from John Laurinaitis read, due to budgetary cuts and with immediate effect as of today, 4/29, we have come to the terms to release the following. Those names included, let me get through these. We can talk about it here in a minute. Dexter Loomis, Malcolm Bivens, Dakota Kai, Harlan, Persia Parada, Raylan Devine, Draco Anthony, Vish Kanya, Mila Milani, and Blair Baldwin. It is said they are under a 30-day non-compete clause and will become free agents from WWE on May 29th. WWE claims there is no more budget cuts or NXT stars being cut as of this moment. And yeah, there were some big names in there, Brian. You see this list. What jumps out to you with these NXT stars being cut?
Well, Dakota Kai steps out the most because it's somebody that we've seen under the WWE banner for a while. And, there was a time where she was going to get called up to SmackDown. And I think everybody kind of been waiting for her to be on either Raw or SmackDown more permanently. And that just didn't happen. But she is somebody that a lot of people supported and really think highly of. So she is somebody that I'm a little bit surprised by, and I think will pop up with another, prominent brand pretty soon. And I guess the other one, quite honestly, is Harlan. And the reason for that is, well, twofold. Number one, how much some people, especially Paul Heyman, talked about him early on when he got signed. And the other thing is too that he kind of fits that mold of what WWE is always looking for. You're talking about a big guy. I mean, what is he, 6'4", 6'5"? He's close to 300 pounds. He played football, right there. I mean, where NXT's at. He played at the University of Central Florida, where I'm an alumni. And so he was there, and there was a lot of people talk about him, and it sounds like it just did not work out. I mean, he got on TV very, very quickly. They had him in a match very quickly, and it was very short, but you could tell that he was extremely green. But it's a different age of WWE now, where in the past, maybe they would hold on to somebody for a lot longer, but they're not doing that now. It's kind of this new model where it's like, bring people in, and if we don't see anything pretty quickly within like the first 3 or 4 months, then you know what, we'll ship them out and we'll just bring in another class.
Yeah, the one big noteworthy thing here to me that stands out is we have this list of NXT stars being cut, but it's not like in the last year or two where there were multiple. Right after the pandemic hit 2 years ago, major cuts happened across the brand. Last year, lots and lots and lots of talent cut on both the main roster and NXT. So this feels a little bit more contained. And to your point, Brian, it seems like now they are really, bringing people in. If they don't work out, letting them go sooner. But it's not that we're going to stack up the talent roster behind the scenes here and keep people on for a long time. So you mentioned this, right? Harlan, I think one of the big names here. I see some people in the chat room calling out some of their surprise shocks here. I'm shocked with Dakota and Dexter. It was shocking. Thank you, Samantha. And then we have Bobo here saying only Malcolm and Loomis and Harlan have potential out of that group. You said it, right? Harlan came in with some really big buzz, kind of like that Brock Lesnar style buzz. But the word going around the street, according to Fightful, was he had not progressed in the ring enough for the NXT coach's liking. And that seems to be kind of what pushed him over the edge. The other two names you mentioned there, Dakota Kai, multi-time NXT Women's Champion, had been with the company since 2016, had worked some smart. In fact, people thought she was going to be on the main roster last year. And again, shocking cut there, I think, with the potential there. And the other one coming up, Brian, a lot is Malcolm Bivens, which of course we know WWE doesn't like to leverage managers as much as they used to, but he's done a lot in the last couple of years. And it seems like, unlike maybe Loomis, maybe Harlan, maybe Dakota Kai, Bivens was one that WWE actually wanted to keep. Of course, he's been with Diamond Mine as of late. And they actually offered him an extension. He had been given an extension last year, kept him on a little bit longer. And then Bivens was offered an extension this past February that he actually declined and made it clear he did not want to resign. Any thoughts on Bivens there?
Well, I mean, he's a guy too that we all see how talented he is, and we see how quick-witted he is when it comes to social media or like videos that they do and things like that. Outside of even seeing what he did on television, because it took a long time for him to get on TV, and he hasn't been on for too long. But WWE, while they wanted to keep him, they typically just don't have big roles for managers. Like you don't see them, or very, very little. So I think his fit is probably elsewhere outside of WWE. So it makes sense that he wanted to get out of there and he did not want to sign a new contract. And by the way, I have to throw this in there. I still find it laughable every time that somebody from WWE throws out like, we need to make cuts for budgetary reasons. You're more profitable than you've ever been in the lifetime of the company. What is going on?
Due to budgetary cuts is kind of their catch-all for
cuts. Dude, those cuts of what those people are making is so minuscule. And like I said before, this is just kind of this different day and age of WWE where it's like, hey, this takes time for some people. Not everybody's even going to catch on or show even a little flash or a glimmer early on. Sometimes you have to write it out, and at a certain point, it clicks with somebody. Like, here's an example, okay? Aaliyah, okay? She's on the main roster now. She was with NXT forever, but at a certain point, something clicked. They stayed with it. And I don't think you're going to get that these days unless there's really something special that stands out. And they say, well, this isn't clicking yet, but we think it's going to. But I think it's going to be fewer and far between now.
Well, and you look at the fact that most of these talents had only really been around since 2019. I know we talked about Dakota Kai being there a little bit longer. And half of that time was taken up with the pandemic, right? You're not getting those reps in front of a live audience. It's a very different feeling, and you never know when it is going to click for somebody. It just feels like their threshold for what they expect is much tighter nowadays. And Brian, I wonder, we talk about budget cuts, right? Of course, the rumors have been, and you see it being called out here in the chat room, which is, as Issa, co-host for Tomorrow, say, they're profitable because they're budget cutting, cost reductions, equal process. Yeah, they're really focused on this bottom line right now. And even though, to your point, they're super profitable, we know Nick Khan is back there. People like to envision him being money hungry, but he is looking at that Excel spreadsheet and saying, how much more can we milk out of this? And Brian, is that because here in a couple of years, NBC might be a suitor for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's just the way that they look at the company now is like, yeah, they can afford to keep people on. But at the same time, they're going to be budget conscious in that, like, we only put so much of our budget towards different departments. And when it comes to that NXT roster right now, they're not going to invest a lot of money into that, and if they don't see something quick from somebody, they will move on. And they just say, like, look at our roster right now, it's bloated. We just signed a new class recently. So you know what? We're going to move on from them. And it's just kind of a churn and burn kind of environment that is going to be there. And that's even, I think, why we've seen some of the guys that have been there for a long time recently get called up, including guys like Ciampa, who, we had heard from him for a long time. Like, I'm not interested in going to Raw or SmackDown. Things always change. And guess what? That's where he's at now.
Well, unfortunately, budget cuts and talent releases and contract situations are not only impacting WWE right now. Some other contract notes: Wrestling Observer reporting that Impact Wrestling contracts for Doc Gallows and Carl Anderson are reportedly not close, that those two parties are not close to an agreement on a renewal with Impact officials. Jonah is finishing up his run in Impact after the Rebellion pay-per-view, and Willie Mack is also on the way out, which is a little bit surprising because he was set to receive a major pay raise, quoted into the six figures, but Impact is reportedly cutting his contract there. So Impact is, maybe tying up their budgets as well. I can imagine guys like Doc Gallows, Carl Anderson, they expect a little bit more. They've been on the big stage there. Jonah, Willie Mack, any of these guys stand out to you as maybe ending up somewhere else after they leave Impact?
I'm not exactly sure where they would fit right now because, AEW does have such a loaded roster. And when people want to talk about Ring of Honor, I don't know what the plans are for Ring of Honor yet. Said nobody does, outside of maybe Tony Khan and a couple people in his inner circle. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen with Ring of Honor going forward. I mean, if they already had like a streaming deal or something like that, then maybe that would be a place that they could end up. But for now, Gallows and Anderson are the only ones that I feel like, if AEW does, they could sign them, but if they don't end up in AEW, I could easily see them going back to New Japan Pro Wrestling. And, remember, they were supposed to be originally, AEW was going to sign them and do a huge angle on their debut show. But instead, they re-signed with WWE. So we'll see if AEW can fit them in. I mean, I think they would like to, but they have so many tag teams right now, and there's so many people under contract. Doesn't mean that they won't sign them. And maybe it would be something where they would be in both AEW and New Japan, but those seem to be like the likely places that they would end up, and they could still get maybe not as much money as WWE was offering, obviously, but they'll probably get the healthiest paychecks in those two companies.
Getting some love for Willie Mack in the chat room. Forgotten MMA says he deserves six figures. Kirk Spencer says good brother can go to Japan. And of course, Monkey Armada giving some love to you, Fritzy. This has made my day. I miss hearing your voice. Speaking of giving some love, tweets going out over the weekend giving to love to some of these released NXT stars: Beth Phoenix, Shayna Baszler, and her former tag team partner Rhea Ripley all tweeted out their support for Dakota Kai. Dakota Kai did put out a statement over the weekend. She said, above everything else, thank you all. I am so overwhelmed at all the love and support. The DMs, text, tweets, you all have my heart. I love you. I am thankful for being able to meet, work, and intertwine with so many beautiful people I looked up to, people I learned from. I met some of my best friends over these last few years that will remain in my life forever. I don't know what's next for me. I chose Evie at 17 years old. That chapter is shut. Just know this. I'm far from being done.
I agree with her. I mean, she's got a lot of talent. We've seen her grow up over the years because she's a product of like NXT, when it really surge to what it became. And she's somebody I think a lot of people watched as she evolved and she grew up and to where she is now. And I still think that there's steps forward that she can go. We want to see more from her. I mean, she was a babyface, she turned heel.
Sure.
We've seen that. So hopefully she gets an opportunity on another big stage. By the way, I would have tweeted from her too. Maybe not from this account right here, only because it's not my account. Okay. Just warn everybody.
We do have a little faux pas here. My wonderful
slight
host
glitch,
for tomorrow,
slight glitch.
Issa, her
I'll make
Twitter
it tricky,
account
and
was
everybody,
wrong.
if you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Brian Fritz. It's really that simple. So
We'll get some plugs in later for you, Brian. Save that for the end of the show. Speaking of
Mhm.
tweets here, Killer Cross did tweet out over the weekend as well. See you soon, Sam, in reference to Dexter Loomis. One other big newsworthy contract note coming from the Wrestling Observer. Reportedly, Bret Hart's agreement with WWE is just a merchandising deal, yet it is unclear if he can legally appear in AEW. It was also noted that as of now, of course, everybody's looking ahead to the Owen Hart tournament finals. Bret Hart has reportedly not been contacted to appear at AEW Double or Nothing, where the men's and women's finals of the Owen Hart Foundation Cup will take place. So Bret Hart, maybe potentially a wild card to show up at Double or Nothing. That would make the Owen Hart finals feel even that much more prestigious, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I think it'd be great if he could be there. It's just they've just got to figure out the legal situation between this. And on top of that, if Brett wants to be there, I would think he would want to be there, but nobody's going to risk anything if there's
Sure.
some kind of we're looking at this legally and maybe they don't want to test the waters, shall we say, if it's too touchy.
You've got to imagine Bret Hart's contracts or his lawyers have gone over that contract with a fine tooth comb. If he shows up, like Tony Khan's brought in the best lawyers in America, like they're going to suss this out before they bring him in. But it would be really cool. But it makes me think, Brian, we've seen some of these talents go still, like Cody Rhodes, for example. His pro wrestling tee stores is still open. You can go buy American Nightmare apparel from Cody Rhodes while he's got his WWE shop store open. And as these contracts get a little bit different in the modern pro wrestling age, is there the potential that guys who are, we've seen in the past, a guy gets cut from WWE's licensing deals, their merch goes away or goes on clearance almost immediately, especially if they show up in AEW. Is there the potential where WWE still profits off the likeness of some of these legends like Bret Hart, while at the same time they're showing up for the competition? Would WWE ever allow that?
Yeah, absolutely. They would, man. I mean, it's just everybody can work out their own contract and everybody is going to be different. And I think these days, especially when it comes to like current talent,
Mhm.
depending on where and how bad WWE wants somebody, they can negotiate whatever they want,
Sure.
and I think you're going to see different things like that depending on how badly WWE wants somebody and what they're willing to give. So it might not be something that a lot of their other talent has, but it doesn't mean you can't ask for it. And you know what? Everybody's contract can be different from when it comes to the perks or the things you're allowed to do, because I mean, look at some of the other things, where we're talking about people, making appearances, different things, or, the personal videos and all that stuff like that, now is allowed, or, that's going to be worked in
Sure.
another contract. Cause that's a different form of revenue that I think WWE has to admit, like, hey, we're going to pay you well, but at the same time, if you want to do these other things that don't infringe on the time that you spend here, then we're going to allow that because other places are allowing it too.
That's right. Well, and speaking of crazy contract situations, on Friday Night SmackDown, there was a major change to the WrestleMania Backlash event during the contract signing, of course.
Wait,
There was supposed
WWE
to be-
changes stuff like a week out of a pay-per-view? You
Not
gotta be
only
kidding
that,
me.
Roman Reigns came out and ripped up an official WWE contract during a contract signing. Brian,
Was
can
it
you
2
believe
pages and big letters that said WrestleMania Backlash on one part, and then the other part said
logo right
SmackDown?
there in the middle? That's right. That's right. With one
Everybody
spot to
flips
sign.
it open. There's the line. I gotta scratch my name on there.
With those chairs that they rarely ever use. Yes. So on Friday Night SmackDown, there was supposed to be a contract signing between RK Bro and the Usos for the, I think fans were really into this idea. The winner take all match for the tag team title supposed to happen literally this Sunday. There was a brawl in the ring. Drew McIntyre came out during that brawl to kind of even the score between the Bloodline and RK Bro. And immediately after that, we saw backstage Paul Heyman confronted Adam Pearce and talked him into making the winner take all match instead a 6-man tag match between the 6 men. There's no word yet on any other potential changes to the card, but they basically took away a tag team title match and really two of the biggest titles right now that Roman Reigns is holding, both of the world titles or the Universal title on his shoulders, and made it a non-title match for Sunday. So I can imagine some fans are upset that they have removed a pretty hyped up match from this Sunday's pay-per-view.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's a six-man now, so there's a different dynamic. You've got Roman now going to be in the match because before it was just going to be a tag team match. You got Drew McIntyre in the match as well. So this doesn't surprise me in the least. WWE, they've got SummerSlam obviously coming up at the end of July, but they've got a couple of big shows between then. They got to fill that out. So, I mean, they've got Hell in a Cell and Money in the Bank, I believe, before they get to that. So this is something that, hey, we can do the six-man tag right now, and then we can wait it out, and we can do the tag team match, on one of those shows. Maybe we do a rematch on one of those shows, something like that. So, I mean, it makes sense, I get from that standpoint, that they drag it out. Just too bad that they had already kind of announced it and then said, wait, hold on a second, we're pulling this one back. So
well, I think to me that's the bigger disappointment here, right? Is that we're losing, and what was going to be a great match, and I'm imagining that we're not going to see either of these titles change hand. Part of that is because Wrestling Observer reported WWE wants to hold off on a major Roman Reigns match between himself and Drew McIntyre. They have been doing the singles matches at live events recently, but WWE officials reportedly want a one-on-one match for the titles between these two men to be at a bigger show. Of course, WrestleMania Backlash, despite having the WrestleMania name, maybe not a huge show. You mentioned the summer shows coming up here, Money in the Bank, SummerSlam, both stadium shows here. But we all know come September, we're going to have that huge stadium show in the UK. And so I wonder, Brian, how long can we hold off on a potential Roman Reigns Drew McIntyre match? You can heat this bad boy up, but can you keep it going all summer with these multi-man matches? And how do you build TV between now and then, with the idea being that the titles might not change hands for 4 more months?
Well, that's the thing, and that's what they have their work cut out for. And it could be something as well as somehow Drew wins one of the titles. Do they do something and have a stipulation where it's just one of the titles? Then they, face off again on another match, to kind of prolong it. And when it comes to the two big ones of the summer, when you talk about SummerSlam and you talk about the Castle show, Tyson Fury could be at one of those, especially the ones overseas, because remember, he's a UK fighter. He just won his latest heavyweight championship match. He has retained his title, and, him and Drew have been going back and forth at one another probably for about a year now. So to do a stadium show, and if you can get Tyson Fury, who is interested in doing it, as long as the money is right, that could take up one of those big shows. So you could do that at SummerSlam, or you could do that, at the overseas show. So, I mean, there's one opponent, and then the other one would be Roman. I would think, to me, Roman against Drew, whether it's the first time they do it or not, that's going to be at SummerSlam. We all know that WWE isn't worried about overdoing a match. They're big on rematches anyway. And then if you can get them, you do Tyson Fury at the other show, and there's a couple of big shows that are booked right there.
So it's interesting because we know that they want to keep Roman Reigns strong. Actually, over the weekend, Roman Reigns sent a message out to The Rock at an O2 Arena house show saying, y'all know how to make your tribal chief feel special. It goes without saying, but it's been too long since I visited London. When you get into the groove and doing these tours, sometimes one can forget how much energy y'all bring to the arena. Of course, WWE is touring overseas right now for their typical post-WWE UK tour. He said, I know one thing, Paris, the location of the next show, has its work cut out. Y'all were awesome tonight. And then some fan chanted at him, what about The Rock, right? And he said, yeah, The Rock can get it too. So we still think they're possibly building towards a Roman Reigns Rock match next year, maybe at WrestleMania, potentially in Hollywood. But Brian, you mentioned that potential big fight between Drew McIntyre and I wonder, and Tyson Fury. And I wonder, does a title add to that match? Could we see, we've seen this in the past, right? Where they have a champion that they're holding on to for quite some time, and a multi-man match causes the champion to lose. I think one of the great instances of that is Vince McMahon taking the pin to cost Triple H his title 20 years ago. So do we see Roman Reigns, they want to keep him strong for The Rock, lose one of these world titles between now and SummerSlam or even after? Or does Money in the Bank play a role in how that happens?
See, this is where they kind of paint themselves in a little bit of a corner, because I think it's cool that Roman has held the title for as long as he has. And I would like to see him, have it all the way to WrestleMania next year. The thing is, whether it's The Rock or somebody else, who is that next person? Who is the person that is going to beat him for a title? And I think one of the people that we've looked at is Drew McIntyre. As a guy that's been there before. Remember, he was champion during the pandemic. And I don't think we truly know how big of an act he could have been with the crowd response during that. He still gets a big response now, but for him to get that moment and to win a championship, on that big stage of whether it's a SummerSlam or WrestleMania or whatever, and then have a title run with fans there all the time. We haven't seen that yet from Drew. And he's one of the guys that they've held off on, and they want to do this on a bigger stage between him and Roman, and rightfully so. So maybe it isn't that big of a deal if they have Roman lose to Drew, and maybe they do something where, there is kind of a wonky finish or something like that to help protect Roman, because you don't necessarily need the titles on the line if you're going to do an attraction like Roman Reigns against The Rock. If you're going to have The Rock there, you don't necessarily need the titles. The Rock is the attraction. You don't have to worry about the titles at all. But I mean, that's where WWE is right now, is just trying to figure out, like, if it's not Drew, then who is it and when is it? And I don't know if they have an answer to that right now. Maybe they do, or maybe they're still kind of searching for somebody to get hot at the right time. It's the right name, and they feel like now is the time to pull the trigger.
Of course, we all know right there in the wings, promised to come back. Actually, it's not on our run sheet today, but said he would even bring back the double-tipped eagle if he won the title. Cody Rhodes has come back white hot, and I think that this feud with Seth Rollins has done wonders for him. Could he win the Money in the Bank? Could that be a way to get the title off of Roman without making him look weak? To your point here, Drew McIntyre, I feel like, has deserved that big moment. Doing it in front of his hometown crowd would just be incredible, and I think it would really cap off how special he has been since returning to WWE. Got a lot of options, but also you're going to unify the tag titles. You think you want all the titles unified. How do you build shows around that? And again, my question always goes back to, how do you build months of shows around guys whenever, just like we saw with WrestleMania this year, we're not going to get them together for 3 months, but we've got to fill 2 more months of TV. So lots of things to figure out there. Speaking of Drew McIntyre, I'll jump ahead on the run sheet here. He was in a match last week as part of this tour with Bobby Lashley. And Bobby Lashley actually took a pretty scary fall. Of course, we all saw we saw Drew McIntyre cut the top rope a few months ago with his sword. This is not what happened here. Bobby Lashley hit the top rope. The top rope bust during this European tour. Bobby Lashley went tumbling over the top. Luckily, Sami Zayn was there ringside, helped stall for time, helped Lashley back in the ring. It was a very scary moment, but it seems like Lashley is fine. McIntyre later tweeted the photo and said, "Thank you, WWE Newcastle. We tore the house and the ring down." And Lashley reacted on Twitter saying, "And some of y'all think I'm not the toughest guy in WWE." So it just goes to show, WWE still uses a classic ring rope style. And pro wrestling, you never know. It is still a dangerous sport, even with typical normal moves, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's scary when you see something like that happen. I remember, back in the day, a long time ago, Arn Anderson had a spill at an NWA show. I mean, this is a long time ago. This is like Arn in his prime. And it's scary as well. Like that ring rope breaks and you're leaning up against it. And next thing you know, you go head over heels and you don't know if you're going to land on your head or your neck. And remember, back then, a lot of times they didn't even have mats outside. It was just like exposed concrete. So hopefully they at least have mats here. But regardless, even if they do, I mean, scary things can happen just from something as simple as that. So luckily, Bobby was okay.
It seems like Bobby is fine and dodged just a few months ago, right? We saw Big E take a normal move slightly off and we saw what happened there. So, pro wrestling, it is still a dangerous sport. Last thing on our run sheet today, I want to talk about big news over the weekend regarding one of our favorite wrestling related shows. Dark Side of the Ring, Wrestling Observer reporting Dark Side of the Ring is no more. Of course, Dark Side was one of the most popular shows ever for Vice TV. It ran for 3 seasons. It dug into some of the seedier sides, we'll say, of the pro wrestling industry. And one of the things the Observer is pointing out is how controversial that Plane Ride from Hell episode was. A couple of things about that. Of course, if you watch the episode, we know that it got Ric Flair in a lot of trouble for exposing himself to the flight attendants. But part of the controversy was these wrestlers were relying on memories from 20 years ago. And, they were saying there were some inconsistencies with some of the stories. It wasn't just one flight. There were multiple flights. Then, of course, some of the wrestlers were complaining. Jim Ross, Tommy Dreamer, WWE Hall of Famer Rob Van Dam, they were kind of complaining about how they were depicted on the episode and claiming some of their quotes were taken out of context. Of course, I think Tommy Dreamer was the one who took the ire of a lot of fans' wrath during that show. So yeah, Dark Side of the Ring no more. Brian, were you into the show? Did you watch it much? Did you like it? What did you think about it?
I mean, for the most part, I liked it, but I also watched it with a grain of salt from the standpoint like, okay, I'm watching this from certain people's vantage points, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all of it is true. There's going to be some things that maybe get taken out of context or get blown up for dramatic effect. And like you said, I mean, we're talking about, guys trying to remember stuff from 20 years ago. And, I can't remember stuff from 20 years ago and I don't take bumps. Okay. or put anything else weird in my body. So, I mean, for a lot of wrestlers, I mean, trying to remember stuff from 20 years ago, I mean, it's amazing if they can, So, I mean, your memory might not always be the best after what they've done with their lives.
Yeah, and that's a fair point, right? We're talking about long ago incidences before the age of Twitter and social media and everything being documented, and even as many wrestling news sites as there are today. So the facts maybe aren't always quite as easy to get to in something like that. However, it's worth pointing out, though, that's not where this story ends. Dark Side of the Ring is no more, but Dark Side creators Evan Husney and Jason Eisner are working on a new TV show for Vice TV. Trekopedia chiming in here, Vice TV screwed over fans by locking episodes on their site and not allowing fans to watch unless they have cable or satellite provider. I know some fins were limited. They are all on Hulu, I believe. So if you like Dark Side, check that out. But you better get that Vice subscription going because this new show from the same creators of Dark Side of the Ring, actually see them working alongside The Rock and his $7 production company. Now, Jim Ross had previously revealed that he was working with $7 on a wrestling project that would focus on the territory days of pro wrestling. JR said he was being joined by fellow WWE Hall of Famers Michael Hayes, Ted DiBiase, and Jake Roberts for one episode on Mid-South Wrestling. The concept for the show is that there will be episodes on the different top territories each week, plus other topics such as women's wrestling and the territory days. They say this show will follow a similar format to WWE's own Table for Three, where there will be a panel of guests reminiscing about their time in the territories. And it was noted that a key to the Mid-South episode is that with The Rock's involvement, WWE is represented as Hayes was allowed to appear on the project. So this seems like a very different kind of show for Husney and Eisner to be pursuing, although still with Vice TV, a little less documentary and a little more maybe pro WWE. What do you think?
Well, you get WWE on board and allows guys to tell stories. People love hearing stories from their time. And I mean, when we watch those shows, I guarantee if you want, you can start playing the drinking game of every time somebody says back in my day, I mean, you'd be drunk probably 5 minutes into it. And in the stories that some of those guys have are going to be pretty wild. It's just how far can they go? And I don't think we're going to have too many stories about how Michael P.S. Hayes and the Freebirds used to indoctrinate people, when they became friends with them or, hey, you're now part of the company now, things like that. But, it does get WWE involved and it kind of gets their stamp of approval, I guess, and still gives them or gives whoever's going to be on that show kind of an outlet to like tell stories. That's what people want to hear. They want to hear the wild stories of how crazy wrestling used to be.
This episode of the Wrestling Inc. Daily is brought to you by Raycon. Moms out there, they're one of the few people that actually call you on the phone and they leave you voicemails anymore. They're like, hey, how's your pro wrestling journalism career going? And I'm like, every day is weird. I cover pro wrestling journalism. So, why not this Mother's Day? Why don't you spoil your mom with the gift of quality premium wireless audio, courtesy of our good friends over at Raycon. So Raycon are these wireless earbuds that I've got in my ear right now. They are must-have for super moms, all of those masters of multitasking who need to keep their hands free. With Raycons, they can stay entertained listening to their favorite podcast, music. They can take phone calls. I was just doing that in the other room. You got this vivid voice technology, all of it hands-free. Look, wearing them, not touching anything. They're user-friendly for moms that aren't used to like wireless technology. Easy to set up. I just opened up the case, which was super easy to do. And then, boom, on my phone, I went over to the Bluetooth area. It said everyday earbuds. I connected, and I'm listening to the music, and I'm talking on the phone. And this right here is great. They got all these different color options you can pick from. I chose black, like the black color, but you can find mom a color that suits her and her personality and her style. You're going to get these optimized gel tips. They're going to make sure that your earbuds fit perfectly in ear. You get to choose from one of 5 sizes. And trust me when I say this, they're not going to budge. Okay, they're not going to budge. Watch me. No budging. I'm swinging my head around. They're staying perfectly in my ear. So for the mom on the go, Raycons offer 8 hours of playtime, a 32-hour battery life with their compact portable charging case just right here. They're priced just for you. You get the great quality audio. You get half the price of other premium audio brands. And Raycon's everyday earbuds right here, they have over 49,000 5-star reviews. So tell your mom how much you love her. Make sure she hears it in crystal clear audio by going to buyraycon.com/wrestling inc to get 15% off your Mother's Day order. Again, that's buyraycon.com/wrestling inc. And we want to thank Raycon for sponsoring the Wrestling Inc. Daily.
So, I mean, I guess I lied. Nick actually is with us in spirit. We just have him in a closet doing ad reads for the time being while we're doing this. Now, Brian, thank you for joining me for our little Between the Ropes reunion, but for our Wrestling Inc. Daily Monday episode. And Brian, you rightfully pointed out, I missed some huge news today. So after the break, we have a major source of news. Brian, what's going on?
Well, we have to wish a very special happy 50th birthday to The Rock, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, turning 50 today. You might not know this, Mike, but so I will be turning that same age early next year. And if you can't tell, The Rock and I, we have the same genetics. I mean, you can see the guns right here, and just, just the muscles bursting out of my traps,
good looks,
everything,
man, the veins
all of it.
popping
So
up. Yeah.
it's amazing how different two people can look when we're only like, less than 8 months apart, when it comes to our age. But happy birthday to The Rock.
That's right. Y'all could have literally grown up together at the same elementary school, same preschool. Imagine how different things would have been there.
Mm-hmm. John Oliver shares the same birthday as The Rock as well. And I mean, same genes. My genes are actually pretty closer to John Oliver's than they are to The Rock's. But
it's funny. I was thinking that as I look at you, you're a little more John Oliver. Yeah, we need like one of those little, charts, right? Are you more John Oliver or Dwayne Johnson?
What gave it away? The pastiness or the glasses?
No comment. Speaking of no comment here, and where people might end up, today's Twitter question for the mailbag was, where would you like to see recently released WWE NXT star Dakota Kai end up? With just over 25 votes, our options were AEW, Impact Wrestling, Ring of Honor, or other. AEW has a commanding lead here with 48% of the vote. Impact Wrestling, 16%. Ring of Honor, whatever that might look like in the future, is sitting at about 20%. And of course, other is 16%. And you all refused to do your write-ins today. AEW, Dakota Kai. Brian, what are your thoughts? Could Dakota Kai be a difference in maybe a women's division that could really use a little step up?
Yeah, I mean, she seems to fit in very well there, with what they have for that roster. That roster could use somebody with her talent and experience. I mean, and we need other opponents for people like Britt Baker and Jade Cargill and Jamie Hayter, Thunder Rosa. So, now they've got Toni Storm as well. So I think she would be another welcome addition to that women's division and can help boost it even further. I mean, I think they need some more women that not only good in the ring, but also have some more experience. And, Dakota still has never gotten that big break, when it comes to a big stage of like a Raw or SmackDown, but she has a lot of experience, when it comes to being on television with NXT. And I think that she'd be a great addition to AEW.
I could not agree more. I think, we've been talking about what could be that shock back for that division. Dakota Kai is absolutely what that could be. So now Forgotten MMA disagreeing, saying that AEW's roster is bloated. We'll just, kind of had like headlock heel points out right here. I'm sour on new AEW signings because they just wind up on Rampage or the YouTube shows. And I think talking about a Dakota Kai showing up there, what's the kind of exposure? We will see. Pro wrestling, it keeps on going every Monday, as Jeff Jarrett likes to say. It's a new week, a new show, new opportunities. Brian, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today. I have had a hell of a good time bringing back Between the Ropes for one day only. And just, Brian, what would you like to plug, promote, put over? I know you have a podcasting business. What's going on and what do you want to send fans to? Not obviously NYC Demon Diva, who will be with me tomorrow.
That is not mine. Yeah, everybody can follow me at Brian Fritz when it comes to Twitter. And like you said, I do have my own podcasting business. So I worked in radio for over 2 decades and I've done podcasts and everything. So now I produce podcasts professionally. So if you're looking to get a podcast started or you have one and you want to make it sound better, you can have me handle that. You can go to podcastingdoneright.com. podcastingdoneright.com, and you could go there, you can contact me and see all the different things that I do, and I can help your podcast sound even better.
All right, thank you, Brian. I will be back here tomorrow with NYC Demon Diva And if you like what you saw here today, please give me a follow. I am on Twitter at The Real Wiseman. You can follow Wrestling Inc. at W Inc. Daily. You can follow Wrestling Inc. on all of social media channels. And be sure to come back tonight for the Wrestling Inc. podcast that will air immediately following Raw. Thanks again to everybody who joined us today. And remember, if you winked, you didn't miss it.